Okay, why don't we get started here? I'm hosting myself, I discovered. Most people come in from outside and they have a host that's who's invited them, and that's not the case here. I'm Jim Carey. I've been here 44 years. I'm retiring in June. This will be the last seminar I give as an active faculty anyway. And in any case, I appreciate everybody coming. I've got to run this Zoom too to let people in. Yeah, anyway, look, this part of my talk here is actually reaching back to just months after I arrived here in 1980 when the medfly outbreak. I was teaching Entomology 104, insect ecology, and to keep things connected to the real world and current events and so forth, I developed a medfly life table, and it's sort of like the rest is history. So, in any case, so okay. We'll get everybody admitted here as we, let's see, hang on. Okay, so, yeah, look, here's the title. I have California fruit fly invasion crisis. I used the word crisis for a reason, but there's other titles that I played around with. How bureaucracy guarantees insect eradication failures would be one. You'll see this as I go through the talk today. Another is complete detachment of entomology, science, and policy. And that's the disturbing part of this for me, is that there's science that reveals one thing about this invasion, and there's policy that's just ossified. It's just locked in to this particular policy worldwide. Still getting these here. And anyway, so we're back to crisis here. Why did I call it a crisis? First off, you know, the fruit flies here, we're talking about tephritids like medfly, is that they're economically devastating. They can shut down a whole region of the state, if not the state itself, simply with their presence. Secondly, the invasion covers the entire state. This wasn't the case 30, 40 years ago, but it is now. They're really permanently established, and I hate to say that because it sort of gives me chills. It's so serious, but in fact that's the case, and we have to face that reality. And then really there was a huge outbreak this year, past year, 23, in redlands. 600 flies were captured. Usually it's 1 and 2, but it's clear to me that these are adapted now. You know, in invasion there's a lag period. These, at least the oriental fruit flies, really fully adapted now. I've organized this into 4 main parts here. Background, the invasion itself, I cover lessons learned from that, and then moving forward. So that's how I've organized it. So look, again, going back to when I arrived was appointed March 1 of 1980. June 5th is a historic day because they captured medflies both in the Bay Area and in LA, the exact same day. At least check the traps, and that's when they discovered it. And so the Chronicle had a piece here. I pulled a few screenshots from here. It was in 1980, California's first war on the medfly. This is, you know, this covered 1,400 square miles. This is in the Bay Area. There was the same thing going on down in LA. 8 different counties in the Bay Area. There's 43 different cities and 2 million people. And that's the kind of signs you'd see when you drove around the Bay Area, entering medfly quarantine and so forth. Here's an example of what they were doing, backyard to backyard stripping fruit. Here's the insect trap for adults. This was definitely in the press and a lot of protests. The helicopters, one reason I put in the abstract in this particular talk was it's below the radar, is because it is that when you're flying helicopters, it's definitely on the radar of people spraying. But now it's no more aerial spraying, which is good from an environmental standpoint, but nonetheless the medfly and other flies have not gone away. In fact, they continue to come in. And there's an example of protests back in the 80s. We opposed death in the sky and so forth. Now look, then they declared in the fall of 82 that they declared eradication. And it cost $100 million in 1982 money. It's about $350 million in today's money. Okay. Now, there, I had never seen a medfly. But as I said in my introduction, I was teaching insect ecology, and so I put together a handout. In that handout, then I did some Leslie matrix projections and population, more than just a simple handout of life table. And I took this to CDFA, and somebody here, and anyway, they liked what I had discovered. For one thing, it was that the adult medfly population consists of only 5% of the total population. Of course, there's assumptions there of, stable age distribution and so forth. But as a first approximation, they're trying to control this huge population, and you really have access, at least for the bait sprays and so forth, for a small percentage of the total. That's true with any diptera and many of these pests, Lepidoptera pests too. And then, so they gave me money and I went to Greece, and it's just basic biology, but anyway, I became an expert, right? And there were a few others, Ken Hagen down at Berkeley that had studied medfly in Hawaii some. But beyond that, there's, nobody was an expert in the state because you can't study it in the state. It's not a pest. Where are you going to get funding? So anyway, here's the outbreak so that was 1980 to 82. And so that then, it went away. I got a little money to go to Hawaii, became more of an expert and so forth. But then it went away and the funding goes away as well. And I was in a period of about 1.5 years, 2 years, I go, okay, that was interesting, but in fact, out of mind, out of sight, out of mind, out of money. But lo and behold, the medfly reappeared. And so that then they asked me to be on the scientific advisory panel since I was an expert now, right? And so there is, it looks like a biker gang there, but it's really not. It's us on the trapping, or not the trapping, but the scientific advisory panel. There's the USDA guys, Gerald Chambers, Roy Cunningham, and Carol Calkins, and there's the late Dick Rice, part of our faculty here, and myself back 30 some odd years ago. And anyway, this was a big deal because it was still spraying and it was really controversial. And so, this was really a big deal down in southern Cal. Then they called a committee of the whole meeting on the medfly. So that's a California State Assembly. Committee of the whole means the entire committee. And so they met and they asked both Dick Rice and myself to testify. And so the LA Times had contacted me before this testimony, and so I gave them kind of insights on what I was going to talk about, and they were really pretty interested because there was huge pressure because what I had done is I'd taken drafting paper and put it. This is pre-Google Maps. And put drafting paper, put it on a overlay on a drafting table with a map of LA. And with the overlays, put where they'd found them in 1980, 81, and then where they're finding them now. And lo and behold, they were superimposed. And so that the argument was they're just always being reintroduced. By the way, that's the, sort of the party line from then till now. I talk about that a lot here as I go forward. But in any case, none of the committee agreed with me on that, and including Dick Rice, although he was kind of on the fence there some. But in any case, the science told me that was what was going on. And so anyway, I testified, and there it is. They made the front page, not my picture, but nonetheless the article did. I was on a back page for that picture. And here it was that Carey said his analysis indicates that the medfly has become endemic. That's actually not the word I used, because endemic is native to the region. But in any case, I used established. They changed it to endemic. In any case, then a parade of scientists and government officials contradicted Carey's analysis, blah, blah, blah. That's a theme throughout this talk, by the way. And so there it was. I'm still getting people jumping in here. And okay, then, but there was an op-ed, that's the same issue, and judging by the belittling and defensive reaction, one would think Carey had declared the world is flat, blah, blah, blah. They were unwilling to even consider the wisdom of the testimony of Carey. And so that, I was out there. Then there was that same issue at Science Magazine. They had an article, Entomologists and the Maelstrom. And within the Scientific Advisory Committee, I met stiff resistance. This is Roy Cunningham and the others. And so we have that. And then I was invited to write this article for Science. And which I did. And so that instead of just hand wave, well, I wasn't hand waving, I had data, but it wasn't published. But I said, I want to write this up. Put my arguments on paper, put the data out there, let them argue over the data, not just assertion, right? Anyway, there's that, and there are 13 letters to the editor were submitted over that. No letter supported my conclusions, and they printed 2. And one was my response. And one of these letters was from the CDFA director, Henry Voss, at the time. There was a blue ribbon panel appointed by UC to look at the data. And that was great. On the other hand, they didn't look at the data so much. They looked at my arguments and basically. And and they didn't conclude one way or the other, pretty equivocal. But anyway, he said they stated medfly not endemic. But in fact, they said it wasn't endemic because of the semantic point, not because of the substance, right? I have no experimental data. I don't know where I'm supposed to get that. And relied on incomplete data. Well, that's what you have, not everything. But they were confident the medfly was fully eradicated. I had a response to that I was actually really proud of. I took them point by point and retort. I also over the years, went after funding. And here's one for the Farm Bill back in 12, and they said, well, it's going to duplicate efforts, we're already doing that. Well, what do? They weren't doing that, and I've never seen anything published out of the USDA. But then I went to UC, and the program director of this program, the endemic and invasive pests, said if you can't work with CDFA, we can't really fund you because it's not going to do anybody any good. The problem is, I couldn't go to CDFA, or I mean I would have, but they, rejected my conclusions from the data, and they weren't willing to look at the data. So anyway, it's just, there it is. But over the years, there's some pretty substantial papers that came out, and I have 2 close colleagues, one from Greece and one from China, that we co-published together as well. And so, what do you do as a scientist? You publish in the best journals you can. One in Science I described, a couple in ecology, ecological applications, Proc B, biological conservation, and so forth. Then there was a symposium of the International Symposium on Fruit Flies of Economic Importance. And there's a lot of, fruit flies are a big deal around the world. In 2014, and they devoted the entire symposium, plenary session or whatever, to our claims. My claims initially, but then my colleagues, when we published together, can tephritid pest populations remain undetectable? Well, they don't need to look at any data. They already have the answer to that. And so there's 31 entomologists from 16 countries that signed this. It was basically what I call a loyalty pledge. And so they, had this, everybody signed on. And so that now they can say that everybody in the world, basically, or at least these 31 entomologists, disagree with these conclusions that Carey and his colleagues have come up with. Anyway, and here's a statement. Any scientist, meaning us, who concludes that tephritid eradication efforts may not only be successful is not only unscientific, but also irresponsible, okay? Now bear in mind, so there it is, there's kind of the groupings of countries there, and these are all, there's a couple of academics, but not two, only a couple. But it's all agency types, and that's just their position. And not one of the 31 had ever examined any fruit fly data. Why do they need to look at the fruit fly data when they already know the answer? And anyway, there's also international authorities on this, the Commission on Phytosanitary Measures, and they meet, I don't know about yearly, but this actually was online here. I just pulled it up this morning. And but it's a recent meeting, and they have all the guidelines. And then you go, okay, maybe they have, maybe I could talk to some people there. And it turns out everybody on the Thailand meeting, not everybody, but many were the leaders of the sections for the International Commission, okay? So you get the kind of the the gist of things is pretty baked in that the right answer for any kind of reintroduction, or reappearance rather, of fruit flies around the world, not just in California, is that they're reintroduced. And to claim that they're established is not quite the point, because I understand the ramifications of that. But to treat it as though every one is a new introduction, that's where I have some issues. So look, I came in June 5th, 1980, just a couple months after I arrived, and the medfly outbreak, and then we have today, June 3rd. There's 18 total species, 11,000 detections, and 350 cities that these fruit flies have been detected in. And so that's when I came in. Now here's the protocols, okay? And in my abstract of this talk, I said ad hoc. And I'm sure that some people, USDA and CDFA, are upset. Maybe some of them are online. I'm happy that you are if you're online here. But the ad hoc would be to make do for the moment. The thing is that these same protocols are still ad hoc because they're the same. The trapping protocols of 5 traps per square mile back 45 years ago, 50 years ago, was 5 per square mile, is still done. The trigger, that is when you launch an eradication program, it's the same, is that it's 1 gravid female or 2 males. The quarantine area is the same 5-mile radius to draw a circle around that, and they're all in quarantine. The treatment, the one difference is no more helicopters, but the treatments other than that are pretty much the same. And to terminate an eradication program is the same, and that is that 3 generations with degree days scale of not finding any flies, then you can declare eradication, okay? Now, that's the an issue here, because how do you define eradication? And we can define if you have, roaches or whitefish in your bathroom or whatever, you don't see them for a couple days, you can declare them eradicated. You can declare whatever criteria you want. But this book on eradication is by this professor back in Columbia, that is Columbia University, that the epidemiologists, they know eradication. I mean, and you have Ebola, it's not, well, we got to sort of beat back. No, you want to know there's no more Ebola. And they've really, worked this eradication out to the 6th decimal place in epidemiology. And she talks about eradication has no meaning except as an absolute. They're either gone or they're not gone. Reduction of population to 0. They talk about an epidemiology that struggled to 0. That is, to get there where there's 0. And apparently eradication comes from a Greek word, but in any case, literally it means out by the roots. And that is really, it is an absolute. Now, we published a paper here, in fact, Frank, you were on that, come to think about it, the failure of success. And that is that you're successful of meeting the regulatory criteria that you don't see flies for 3 generations, degree day generations, but you actually aren't eradicating. And that is the big issue here, underlying actually this talk. And I've come up with 3 laws of fruit fly invasions. First law is eradication programs are always 100% successful. That flows from that Thailand declaration, basically. Second law is that new outbreaks are always due to reintroductions, because if they're 100% successful, the only way they could come back would be a reintroduction, right? And the third law is ignore all data that refute first and second laws. It's actually true. And so this is just that locked in for 50 years of this position, and that's how we've gotten into this huge trouble. Now, here's the science. First off, tephritid fruit flies are not Drosophila, okay? Entomologists here, I'm sure everybody knows this, but there are certainly others that may not. So it's not a Drosophila, little vinegar flies. They're the true fruit flies, and they attack, the reason they're pests is because they attack the commodities directly, the fruit that you want to sell, take to market or whatever. There's 5,000 species, about 250 have pest status, but really there's about 5 to 8 medfly, oriental fruit fly, mexfly, that small group that are really the serious pests, okay? Now this is why they're a threat in California. We have the largest ag industry in the US, 55 billion. Fifth largest worldwide supplier of ag products. We grow 200 different crops, and yeah, many of them, the vast majority actually, are subject to attack by tephridids. And most of these, many of these are attacked by multiple species, not just specialists like an olive fly, which is a tephritid, but it's established in the state. Now the monitoring program, that is the trapping for detection of these flies. This is a big deal. Back in 1910, when they discovered the medfly in Hawaii, fruit growers in California became really concerned that it may be introduced into California. So it's really been going since 1910, so well over a century. Not at anything the level we have today, but nonetheless, they've been looking for them. There's right now 100,000 traps statewide, cost about $25 million a year. I estimate it's about $1 billion, give or take a few tens of millions probably, that they've invested in this. Database about 5,000 fruit fly records, or at least locations. There's about 10 to 11,000 flies that have adults been detected. And the date, location, so on and so forth are the records. By the way, when I was on the panel, I asked, so that, you know, the overlays that I looked at with the map and so forth, I had to ask for, do you have data on this? Do you keep data? And it turns out they did. This is back when you have a metal file cabinet that's used to pull those out. They had 3x5 cards. So I got the whole deck and I transcribed them and into, I guess, the equivalent of Excel or whatever back then, whatever we might have had. But then that's how I started plotting these. And but they didn't look at the data. I mean, really, as CDFA told me, Bob Dell, good friends with him back when he was one of the state entomologists, said, you know, as soon as we eradicate, it's like we're done. Okay, now on to the next one. And that is, it's what I call the creative creationism. Oh, that's right, applied creationism. Okay, you have pure science and applied science, and then I said, okay, maybe we have pure creationism and applied creationism where they just fall from the heavens. I don't know, they have no history. Okay, little side joke. And anyway, but I was interested in the history, is so that you have an invasion, how does that develop, and so forth. So here's the database that I developed. I think it's probably maybe the only one in the world, and certainly, I think, pretty complete. But you have, each fly has a number, basically. And so that you have a fly that's caught in 76, September 21, blah. Culver City, there's a lat long. There's other data there too, the host tree and so on and so forth. But in any case, then you can start plotting these out and looking at the history of the invasion. Yeah, there it goes, okay? Now, but just for a side note here, if they've spent $1 billion on trapping program and 750 million, 1 point, whatever, it's a lot of money. But if you do the math, it's about $100,000 a fly. And so they're not trapping them because they want information on the fly itself. But nonetheless, this is a deep, deep resource with huge money. When you think about this, this is only fruit flies in California. How about fruit flies around the world? How about other pests around the world? What a treasure trove of data if, you know, these aphis and their relatives in other countries, you know, agencies, would make these data available, and invasion biologists could really do deep dives into this thing. But anyway, it's, yeah, there it is, just a great resource. So there's the, this is a USDA plot of climatic regions that would be friendly to fruit flies. And so that any place, you know, along that band there in the south, they estimate most fruit flies could survive. And so that what you have here for the history of fruit flies in the continental states, there's a handful that are captured every year or couple, 3 years in Florida. And medfly here and there, and oriental just found a couple decades ago. But these are small, small numbers. In Texas, they actually have the medfly and they got rid of it. It is gone. But there's the mexfly and other Anastropha species in that group that they find once in a while, or actually more than once in a while. Was online last night looking, and actually I think they're established there in southern Texas, but in any case. Well, like California is in a class by itself. 18 species, we're catching scores, if not hundreds, every single year, year in and year out, year in and year out. So that when you look at this, that you have, that's a potential distribution, is that you have propagules, you know, the planes with people with baggage from all over the world just don't come to California, they come from every place in the world. So all these airports in all these states where there's no fruit flies detected yet, they're getting the propagule pressure as you go through APHIS, you know, whenever you come internationally, returning, and you know, they check out whether you have fruits and vegetables or whatever. And but there's no flies there. So there's no, for example, no oriental fruit flies ever been detected there. And we get the hundreds every year. So does the USDA biosecurity only fail in California? Okay, somebody has to explain that if it's not, if these are not established. Okay, so why is eradication so difficult? So I compare it to metastatic cancer. And that is that most cancers aren't just a tumor that you can extract. It's like thousands and thousands of little metastases. It's the same thing with many times, not always, but many times with invasions. And so because you have to be 100% effective in every infested grid, anything short of perfection is control, because any of these can just reinfest you know, the area what's left. So here's a simple model. If you had 100 cells with, that are infested, and you were 95% effective in every single cell, so that you take your backpack sprayer or whatever and you strip, or then also you strip fruit, every single backyard, but 95 out of 100 you get, you know, really cleaned out or whatever, but you know, a few you leave. There's a 99% probability that area writ large is still going to be infested. Okay, now you increase the efficiency to 99%. There's still a 2/3 probability that you didn't get them all. And if you 99.9%, and this is only 100 grids, by the way, it's still 10% probability you're going to leave some. Now, instead of 100 grids, you have 100,000 grids. And, you know, do the arithmetic. It's pretty, that's why it's difficult to really eradicate. Okay, and one other, or a couple other things I wanted to put in here. What is the lag phase of invasions? You know, this idea that you could have flies come in like COVID. People think invasions are kind of like the flu, or in this case, COVID. Is that that's true? You can get COVID sweep, you know, covering the world in a matter of months, which we all experienced. But it doesn't work this way for the vast majority of invasive organisms. The lag phase, this is years and decades required for exotic species. These are tropical fruit flies that have to adapt to the environment that is the Mediterranean climate here. And I saw this a few months ago, that there were plant scientists here that published this in Nature, Ecology, and Evolution in lag time in plants, but it applies across the board, all organisms, where you had lag existed. And there was some that, a non-trivial fraction, that didn't have this lag to this extent. But the average length was 40 years to adapt. They found one, it was some sort of maple that they had a record of in 1600 in UK, but anyway, it's 320 years before it's adapted to the local environment, okay? And there, so you have this number, you have that kind of hockey stick pattern there where you have 100 years where it's just barely making it, but finally it comes together and, you know, goes north. And that is, you know, it's adapted, and so that now it can spread really quickly. And I wanted to touch on the genetics as well. Somebody else coming in here, sorry. Because I had put in this response to my letters to science, that genetics was going to be the answer to this. It turns out it's not. It's just, it shows multiple invasions, surprise, surprise. It's not like a single introduction. And these can be argued both ways. And I found that some of this funding from USDA, for example, that people that did some of the analysis, they know what the right answer is. And so anyway, there's just issues with it. I thought genetics would really do the trick, but it's not, at least what they've done so far. There's huge potential there, but what they've done so far doesn't. It's still too ambiguous. Okay. Now the invasion in California. This is, you know, there it is. The very first one detected the medfly in SoCal, in San Diego, in fact, in 1954. And the last one is tau fruit fly in 2016, but it's 18 and counting. Who knows? I mean, it's unbelievable. California is absolutely worldwide, is in a class by itself for the number of species. Not even Hawaii. You go to the Asian countries, Africa. They have some endemics there, but none of the introductions like this. It's California. It's just amazing. Anyway, but the big ones are for California. Really, the big ones: the medfly, the oriental fruit fly is really serious here, and then the medfly, which is also pretty serious. But the oriental fruit fly is really the worst. It's just up and down the state now. Here's an earlier talk I gave this. I'm just going to whip through these, but this is southern. This is the LA Basin, so this would be the. I can't read. Yeah, there it is. This is a big area. This is a big area, and it's what I call the gathering storm, 75 to 88. The first one was captured in 75 around Culver City. And eradication declared. I'll just go through these quickly. 80, 81. Again, this is back when the Bay Area was a huge outbreak there, but anyway, but they were catching them in the San Fernando Valley down in SoCal. And declared eradication. 82, 84, and 86, they found one each of those years, so they didn't act on it. Single flies, again, remember the triggers, you need 2 flies, at least 2 males, in order to trigger, so they go, well, we're not going to do anything. And so forth. New outbreaks, 87 now. Okay, you get the idea. Then I call it out of control. This is when I was on the panel. And so there it is, 89, 90. Old outbreak areas, declared eradication. 91, 92, same thing, declare eradication, so on and so forth. You get the idea. I mean, it was just really going crazy here. And now, in 95 or 96, they started to release sterile flies. And so then, not quite as many, but there were still some. The thing is with SIT, sterile insect technique, the public loves it. Of course, who doesn't love it because it's not pesticide? The trouble is that whether it works or not, at least you don't catch the flies. But there's a masking effect. When I was on the panel, and I was surprised USDA colleagues agreed with this too. We're going to simply stop the SIT. So you have a read on if they're there, because you have a gazillion sterile flies and then one fertile fly, and you have to sort through a huge number of the flies, and you know they're marked, but on the other hand you have to look for the little fluorescent dye and all that stuff. But in any case, at least it stops the bleeding, so to speak, for catching flies and having to treat. Okay, so there's that. You get the idea here. Okay. Summary of the outbreaks, I mean, it's all over. 60 eradication declarations. Every year, every little outbreak was declared eradicated. And so I just did this. I keep this now. I used to be able to get records, but now they just post it, and they no longer provide any kind of lat long data, or earlier they had addresses and all that. I kind of get it. For the people that live there, you don't want to, anyway, put out addresses. But on the other hand, they do publish maps and put points there, and I can estimate the lat long from the points. At least we get approximation. But this one I just went through because I download all the PDFs that CDFA posts. And so for the last 8 or 11 years, we've had outbreaks of the medfly, 6 different counties. There's the data. Okay. Now this oriental fruit fly invasion, we have San Francisco Bay Area. Yeah, those are really the hot spots. My colleague in Zhao in China, Beijing Agricultural University, put this map together. And so you see it's a heat map, so for the oriental fruit fly, right? There's a Central Valley. They don't jump out, but let me tell you, the Central Valley's pretty serious. 6 different species there. I have a map of that in just a minute. So we've had detections 56 straight years. There's the, from 60 to 2020, Central Valley, you get these, every tick there is a year where they've discovered them. This is just the oriental fruit fly Bay Area almost every year, but not quite, since about 1990. Pacific Coast, a little off and on, but they're there. LA Basin, continuous and statewide, because the LA Basin in particular is just continuous since about mid-60s, okay? Now, here is, yeah, again, I have that. So just, I'll tick through this. This is about 40 years, 50 years of that. This is cumulative. And so this is the oriental fruit fly, the one species in California, or I mean in the LA Basin here. You get a sense of how serious it is. Yeah, so that's 2018, really serious pest. Yeah, here's what I call micro distributions. This is where it's like the equivalent on Google of what I was doing with the overlays on the drafting table with the map. And you can see in 1966 to 2000, this is 45 years. And it can be argued, well, they're just introduced, but you find these over and over and over again, that they're within blocks of each other, and many decades, not just a couple years, decades difference. They're just hanging in there at a very, very low level. Another one, to look at upland, is oriental fruit fly. There's now I'm going to show you the exact same region. What is it, 21 years later? They never went away, they're there. Plus you have new outbreaks right in there, okay? Invasion of Central Valley. Here's the species, this is actually Sacramento. Have to move those dots a little to the left probably. But the medfly has been here. The peach fruit fly, another serious, all these are pretty serious. The medfly, so Fresno, Sacramento here, or Fairfield rather. And then the melon fly, guava fruit fly, and then watch this oriental fruit fly again. It's just taken over the state. But look at that very north one, that's in Redding. That's in Redding. This oriental fruit fly is going to Oregon, in my view. I wouldn't be a bit surprised in 20 years it's found in Medford or something in that region, right in there. Okay, now when you look, there's the Central Valley, the Sacramento Valley, San Joaquin Valley, and now look at this. This is 2023, so that's just last year, So we have them up here in Sacramento, in this region, the Bay Area, Bakersfield. They caught a couple the first time, and then you go to SoCal, and so watch this one right in here. This is the 658 flies in Redland that they captured. And so it's piled them up. And there you have, from whatever that is, from what is that, September through just this year, early this year, 658 oriental fruit flies were captured in these, what is that, 6 different cities. And every one was a repeat, except for the last one. Okay, everyone, they caught them there before. So there you have 8 counties, 20 cities, 650 flies or more. So there it is. I blew this up. This is a map that, this part right in there with the green dots, this is a map posted by, that's the kind of map they post for where they caught these flies. But this is in Redlands. And it's, yeah, what is that? 22 miles. It's about 100,000 acres. So just bear in mind that just for these alone, you have, you know, probably 500,000 houses in that region with backyards. You've got to get everyone 100%, right? Now, on top of that, you have, that's an infested area, but all of these cities around that, in previous years, they'd captured flies as well. It's all through that region. They're infested all through that region. This is the outcome of what I call prioritizing short-term expediency over science-informed policy, okay? Here's the invasion model that I envision, my colleagues. And that is, you have time in the bottom and you have proportionate size. You have a region introduction right in there to the bottom left. And so that's the incipient population, the growth phase. And then it grows, but it's spreading within the region. And then it pops through the radar, basically, shows up the radar. And, you know, they intervene and spray or strip fruit or whatnot. And there they knock it back. And so you have compliance. It's below the threshold now and say we've eradicated. But in fact, you really haven't gotten rid of it. So what you have here, this would be post-eradication. So you look at the one to the right there, and you know, it's spread out more. It's greater within region dispersion, and a higher residual population than what we started with. So it takes a shorter time to pop back through the radar. So the interval between outbreaks becomes shorter. Okay. Now, policy implications, what I call evidence-based answers to policy-related questions. Why have they been occurring annually for the past 6 years? By the way, this is what I'm covering here are a few of the questions that can be answered when you actually look at the data. Okay, just think if you had all these data and you could just unleash statisticians and spatial science, do spatial geography and so forth on this, oh my goodness, it's just a treasure trove of information. It's because it's established. And so here's the model that apparently the state, and for that matter the world, uses. That is, they're introduced, they pop through the detection threshold within a year or two, and then they're eradicated, on and on and on. This could not be, this will not work. It will not work. You have to naturalize at least a little bit, you know. This is what's happening there, really. Probability of first outbreak, we've done this, it's about 4%, okay? And so you get this, I'm gonna keep going here so I get through this. Probability of second and third ones. By the way, for growers, this is important, is that they're at risk. CDFA and USDA provide no information. It's just like bold out of the blue and so forth. No, it's like with these heat maps, you can say, I'm in a high-risk area, maybe I don't want to plant crop X, and so, you know, susceptible to that fly and those flies, and go to crop Y, but at least they're informed. It's not just random. For a second one, it's about 53% subsequent. So in other words, 4% to get a first one, then about 50% to get another one, and then about 80% if you've already had two to get a third one, right? Okay. The distribution of outbreak risk, mostly in the Bay Area, or I mean, sorry, in the LA Basin, so you have something there. Oriental fruit fly, this is really the hot zone. Huge urban area, but on the other hand, there's growers there too. And there's, by the way, there's 2023 redlands right there. So this, you know, heat map was predicted that in some level, right? Capture a single fly, that always, ominous sign, 100% probability. They've never caught a fly where they've, once you kind of get, you know, a species where you're starting to capture, you've never caught a single fly out there wherever and not followed. So instead of a single fly, as in policy, why wait? You don't wait. You go after it right away, okay? Single fly, non-actionable, look at that, okay? Back in the medfly. What does zero capture mean? If you've never captured a fly, good news, it's less meaningful if you've captured a fly. So after one third probability, catch it the next year. If you caught one, about 12% the next 2 years, you get the idea here, okay? Which species of fly should have been eradicated? You can do what they do in multiple decrement life table, bring that to bear. You can say, if we eliminated cancer, what would be the outcome with the rest of the diseases versus heart disease and so forth. You can do that with cause elimination here, and I did that with these flies. I'm going to skip through this, but it would have been better to, if you go, you know, this is hair on fire, go after the oriental fruit fly, pull out all stops. Now it's taken over the state. If they'd have gotten it early on, it was Anaheim where they first found it, okay? Why does it matter? I'm going to leave some time for a discussion here. And that is, why does it matter that we understand what's going on? And that is, I got asked this question all the time in the panel. It's like, okay, genius, what's your bright idea here? And I didn't have such great answers back when I was on the panel, but since then I've thought about it, obviously, a lot. And what is happening here, and this is worldwide, I'm not, you know, going after CDFA or USDA here just alone, or I mean, it's critical. It's basically first responders, okay? If you have a fire, you got to go after it, you know? But if you have fire after fire after fire, you know, you go, look, there's something deeper going on here than just, you know. And so to understand the nature of the problem is important in bigger policy than simply get better fire trucks and, you know, that sort of thing. So by knowing that they're here, or at least having policy that reflects the reality, you know that closing the pathways isn't going to solve the problem. It's not to say you don't close the pathway, of course you do. But nonetheless, that's not going to take care of the horses out of the barn. You can start predicting outbreaks, just like that heat map. You can make contingency plans for major outbreaks. Look at that, 650 fly outbreak in redlands. My gosh, can you imagine that happening in Bakersfield and redlands and so forth? They're going to shut down everything in the valley. Growers can be warned. They get no information. It's just, you know, develop fly-free zones, containment strategies developed. Here's the current policy, 100% success. Lola informed, so what did I mean by that? One action, yeah, let me just skip that. One, here's the current protocol, one fly non-actionable, one fly, it should be actionable. 3 generations, no detection rule, you need to maintain the program. It's not like I've worked out all the protocols, but nonetheless, it's sort of like raised the issue that the current program is not working. Post-program complete reset, yeah. Post-program, that is high vigilance. Don't just pull all traps out, we've done, and so forth. No, keep your traps in. And no risk information. The growers got to be brought into this, you know. Now, here's how what I call the critical mass. For synergistic components of how you can, a bureaucracy can assist in the invasion, help the insects invade. First off, you assert supreme authority, and that is you have phytosanitary commission. I mean, how? These are hundreds and hundreds of people out worldwide, and it's like, this is our policy is, you know, one fly, you know, all these protocols and so forth. I mean, so that you can just shut down any discussion immediately with like FAO and IAEA, say it's this way, that look at this policy, go to the website, and end a discussion kind of thing. It can facilitate the invasion by appearance of eradication success. Okay, they've gone away, you can claim eradication. Trouble, it appears you have, but they really haven't gone away. You can just crush counter arguments. You know, it doesn't matter how many papers I publish, my colleagues publish, or whatever. It's just like dismissed. Crush them right away. Control the data. It's almost impossible to get the data. I have to go to the map to figure this out, you know. But that's not just, that's the detection data, but there's other information too that would be fantastic. And a lot of people, and I don't blame them, withhold, that is that CDFA and the USDA, you get nice money from them, and you don't want to jeopardize the gravy train, right? And so you're not, you know, it's hard to really challenge them, so they're really in charge here. Look, my closing thoughts here are about how to move this this mountain. You know, it's just so locked in. But it's what I call, I gave a talk a number of years ago, and it was something like whack-a-mole, because that's what they're doing, is that you get an outbreak here and you know, suppress it or whatever, and they go away for a while, then over here. But eventually you only have so many thumbs in the dike, and eventually it catches up with you. And I'll tell you what, that Redlands outbreak, I'd never seen that until I really put this talk together, that I knew that they, you know, you look at the announcement that they got an outbreak there. Man, that's a humongous outbreak. Now think of those, you know, 10 of them or 50 of them or whatever, the statewide. Eventually, you've really got to confront this problem. So anyway, why don't I stop there? We still have a few minutes to answer questions for discussion. So thanks very much. My last talk. Neil.
I really liked your idea about, so we could bring statistics or spatial statistics to bear on it. Do you see anybody implementing that? And what kind of an approach?
Well, Carol Larson, who was my student here, and had there were some major issues with personal things and so forth, but she hooked up with a Hyman, Robert Hyman in geography here, and had some nice results, but just never published. At least her thesis is available online, you know. But there's some, that was the first time anybody had really brought some sophisticated statistical software to bear on that. But I mean, this is just on the surface. I just think the massive data that could be, the kind of information that could be teased out of that to inform policy. That's the problem I have. It's just, you know, it's locked in. There's no evolution of policy at all. So, yeah.
So 2 questions. What do you recommend for new scientists to establish development policy? And then my second question is also, like you said, you've been doing this for 40 years. So what was the development of genomics and transcriptomics, has this helped or made the understanding of the medfly better or worse?
Yeah.
Or has it helped?
Let's see if I can take the first one. What do I recommend? Well, you know, it's really hard as a young scientist. But by the way, I thought my career might be over when I testified. And by the way, just I'll get to your question. I'm kind of getting there. By the way, that winter was the coldest winter with bursting pipes all over the state. I don't remember that or not. And I go, my gosh, an act of God eradicated the medflies. and I go, okay, I'm doomed. Because I was so far out on a limb. But look, as a junior scientist, you can't do much. You know, you've got to go along, and I'll tell you what, the USDA, CDFA, anybody online here on Zoom and so forth, I respect them all in the sense that if I was in that position, I didn't have a mortgage to pay. I don't want to lose my job. You've got to go along, you know. On the other hand, as you move through the ranks, and eventually you may be director or assistant director or something like that, is when you could start broaching the concept that maybe we need to revisit this. But it's easy just saying this at our lunch today. It was kind of like wash, rinse, repeat. That's just what it is, 50 years. Just do the same thing over because everybody has a box to check. And as long as they check the box, they get their merit equivalent and onward. Now the genomics, I touched on the genetics because I still view this as really, really important. And you know, CDFA, and I put this in, I guess I put this on the science in my response. But it has to be really a systematic, longer term analysis. In my view, when they catch flies, like 650 flies, you know, they should take a subset of those always, just as part of the protocol to analysis. Just automatic, not as a special much of anything. And so that every fly that they capture or subset, they should be having genetic analysis so that you can ask where did it come from? Is it related to this one over here versus 5 years ago? On and on, you know, huge information. When you think about trapping, you're not trapping just to catch flies per se. You're trapping to get information about the population. And part of that information, not just catch 10 more flies, but rather what's the genetics, what's the host origin. I always found that would be fascinating to know what where they came from, sown fruit, citrus, blah, 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 and so forth, you know, develop that kind of technology. Yeah, Brian?
I really enjoyed your talk. I found some of the same issues with the bee crisis. I think there's a lot of student doctoring going on, and I'm trying to publish a book on that, and I've had very similar responses from the people pushing the orthodoxy, I guess you could call it. And something that's come to my mind, and I wanted your opinion on it, is that when you look at the really old literature in science, like from Darwin's era, they debated each other all the time.
Debated, yeah,
Okay?
right.
A formal debate. And so I think it's really easy for people to sort of form these echo chambers and sign these letters saying that we're right and you're wrong, shut up, and we won't fund you, et cetera, et cetera. But I think if we had, as part of every scientific conference, instead of just people getting up and talking and having a microphone where they can, you know, help, they can sort of do what politicians do before the questions. If we had, actually, like if you were debating, like if you, so my question is, do you think if you were debating these people year after year at the conferences in your field, would they have been able to continue this fiction that they're...
I don't know how they could, but I'll tell you what, I was invited to when they called it gypsy moth, now they call it the spongy moth, but Sandy Leibold. He's one of Jay and my colleagues back in Berkeley, but I debated him on the gypsy moth or spongy moth or whatnot. It was a healthy debate. They flew me back for the spongy moth meetings or whatever, and it was just a good exchange, you know, of ideas. But I'll tell you what, with this world, the fruit fly, it's not just I'm unwilling to talk. This is hostile. This is really hostile. And I gave a plenary talk in Greece way back to one of these international fruit fly meetings, you know. And IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency, that's the director there of that program. I know him, he's Mexican, but that I've known for quite a while. But he challenged me, and I welcomed that in my talk. And it's like, okay, good, we can get this out there. But then at breakfast, I said, maybe we could sit down and talk. And he said, I just was floored because it's just like, I will not waste my time listening to your BS. It was just like, no, there's no discussion. Where do you go with this? Where do you go with this? You know, go no place. Jay?
So I wanted to ask a question about that. So I can imagine if you're working for CFA, and let's just, you know, hypothetically, there's someone there who actually agrees with your interpretation of the data.
Right. There are.
But based on political pressure, there's no way they can
Oh,
acknowledge
no,
that.
absolutely, I get it.
So if you were to draw a pie diagram, I ask you to speculate a little
Yeah.
bit. All the people who have, you know, promulgated an opposing view, do you have any sense, a gut feeling for what proportion of them actually agree with you but are prevented from saying so because of all these pressures?
Well,
And how many truly disagree?
yeah, it's evolved. And I almost brought up a paper because Sandy Leopold was on this paper, where whereas 20 years ago, papers come out and say, you know, Carey and colleagues have this position, but these 150 other entomologists don't agree with them. This one just came out a couple of years ago and I was stunned. They said, we remain agnostic on this. So it's moving from, we adamantly disagree, you know, because Sandy's come out on this in pretty strongly. But, and I go, there's movement, And, but anyway, getting back to that, you know, I know for a fact that there's a number that agree with me, even way back. And by the way, this is when data were pretty thin. Now when you have 650 flies, then it's like, duh, they're kind of there. But when you have ones and twos and, you know, over a few years, this is thin data, so you know. And, no, I mean, there's a number that just said, I would lose my job if I agreed with you, you know. But in fact, you know, and so that there's a number, but it's evolved because the data, how do you deny this? How do you do, I don't know how they do. And yeah, and I've always wondered, do they really believe it? But, and I think some do, because there's this idea of the flu-like just spread, that there's a lot of, it's the hog heaven out there for the fruit flies, huge numbers of fruit, why can't they just, you know, this is a junior high, what I say, this is one of the junior high math things, that if you have 2 houseflies in April, they'll cover the earth by September, you know. Okay, that's exponential growth and so forth, you know. So, well, look, I need to let everybody go here, but, you know, I didn't know if there'd be anybody show up, but thank you for everybody for showing up here. And so we'll go onward. This is my last one, so thanks very much.